there's a quiet frustration that follows procrastination. It's not loud or dramatic at first. It starts as a small voice in the back of your mind. I should be doing this. You open your laptop, you glance at the task, and then somehow, almost automatically, you're checking your phone, reorganizing your desk, watching just one more video. Hours pass. The deadline inches closer. The anxiety grows heavier. And somewhere inside, you wonder, why do I keep doing this to myself? Procrastination isn't laziness. It isn't the lack of intelligence or ambition. In fact, some of the most driven, capable people struggle with it. The psychology of procrastination is far more complex and far more emotional than we usually admit. At its core, procrastination is an emotion regulation strategy. That means it's not about time management, it's about mood management. When you face a task, especially one that feels overwhelming, boring, uncertain, or tied to your self-worth, your brain doesn't just see work, it registers discomfort. Maybe it's fear of failure. Maybe it's fear of success and the expectations that follow. Maybe it's perfectionism whispering that if you can't do it flawlessly, you shouldn't start at all. The task becomes emotionally charged. Your brain is wired to avoid discomfort. The limbic system, responsible for emotional responses, is faster and louder than the prefrontal cortex, which handles planning and logic. So when the task triggers stress or self-doubt, your brain searches for immediate relief. And relief is easy to find. Scroll, snack, clean, text someone, do something, anything that reduces the discomfort right now. Procrastination feels good in the moment because it lowers anxiety temporarily. That relief reinforces the behavior. Your brain learns, avoiding this makes me feel better. And so the cycle strengthens, but relief is short-lived. The task doesn't disappear. Instead, it looms larger. Now you're not just facing the task, you're facing guilt, shame, and self-criticism. Why am I like this? I had all day. Other people don't struggle like this. The emotional weight doubles. This is where procrastination becomes self-punishing. It's not just about delay anymore, it's about identity. Over time, repeated procrastination can erode self-trust. You begin to see yourself as unreliable. You promise yourself you'll start early next time. And when you don't, the disappointment cuts deeper. But here's the important truth. Procrastination isn't a character flaw. Procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's a protective mechanism. Many people who procrastinate struggle with perfectionism. On the surface, perfectionism looks like high standards. Beneath it, though, is fear. If your self-worth is tied to performance, then starting a task becomes risky. As long as you don't begin, you can still believe you could have done it perfectly. Delay preserves the fantasy of potential. Starting exposes you to the possibility of imperfection. There's also the role of identity and self-esteem. If you grew up receiving praise primarily for achievement, you may unconsciously link mistakes with loss of approval. Tasks then feel like tests of your worth. The brain responds to that threat by avoiding it. For others, procrastination is tied to overwhelm. When a task feels too big, too undefined, or too complex, the brain interprets it as a threat to competence. Without clarity, the prefrontal cortex struggles to map out steps. The result? Freeze. Avoidance becomes a way to escape cognitive overload. Interestingly, procrastination is often highest among people who care deeply. If you didn't care, there would be no emotional charge. The very importance of the task amplifies the anxiety around it. In everyday life, procrastination shows up in subtle ways. It's delaying difficult conversations. It's putting off health appointments. It's waiting to apply for the job you want. It's postponing creative projects you dream about. Each delay protects you from immediate discomfort, but distances you from long-term growth. Emotionally, this creates a painful contradiction. You want progress, you want change, but your nervous system prioritizes safety over aspiration. Immediate comfort wins over future satisfaction. There's also a neurological component worth understanding. Humans are wired for immediate rewards. The dopamine system responds more strongly to short-term pleasure than long-term goals. Social media, entertainment, and quick tasks provide instant feedback. Long-term projects offer delayed gratification. Your brain, following its ancient survival programming, chooses what feels rewarding now. But procrastination isn't simply about pleasure seeking. Often, it's about self-protection from negative self-evaluation. Consider how you speak to yourself when you finally sit down to work. Is your inner voice supportive or harsh? If beginning a task activates a critic that says, "Don't mess this up," or "You're already behind," then procrastination becomes a shield. Avoiding the task also avoids the critic. Over time, this creates a loop of self-judgment. You procrastinate to escape discomfort. Then you judge yourself for procrastinating. The shame increases. And because shame is uncomfortable, you avoid again. Breaking this cycle requires compassion, not force. Most productivity advice focuses on discipline, but discipline alone doesn't address the emotional core of procrastination. You can't shame yourself into sustainable action. In fact, research shows that self-compassion reduces procrastination more effectively than self-criticism. Why? Because self-compassion lowers the emotional threat of failure. When you tell yourself, "It's okay to struggle, I can start imperfectly," you reduce the intensity of the fear response. The task becomes less about proving your worth and more about participating in growth. Another powerful shift is redefining the task. Instead of finish the entire project, try work on it for 10 minutes. The brain resists magnitude. It tolerates small, defined steps. Once you begin, momentum often follows. Not because you forced yourself, but because you reduced the emotional barrier. It's also helpful to examine what the task represents. Is it tied to fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of discovering you're not as capable as you hoped? Naming the underlying fear diminishes its power. Vague anxiety feels overwhelming. Specific fear feels workable. In relationships, procrastination can create distance. When you delay expressing feelings or addressing conflict, resentment builds quietly. When you postpone personal goals, frustration leaks into daily interactions. The internal tension affects external connection. But here's the hopeful truth. Procrastination is not fixed. It's a pattern of coping, and coping patterns can evolve. Start by noticing without judgment. When you avoid a task, pause and ask, "What am I feeling right now?" Not "What's wrong with me?" but "What am I protecting myself from?" You might find anxiety, boredom, self-doubt, or fatigue. Each of those emotions deserves attention. Sometimes procrastination is also a signal of misalignment. If you chronically delay something, it's worth asking whether the goal genuinely matters to you or whether it's driven by external expectations. The mind resists what the heart doesn't endorse. Building self-trust happens in small increments. Each time you follow through on a tiny commitment, you strengthen the neural pathway of reliability. Each time you respond to avoidance with curiosity instead of criticism, you weaken the shame cycle. Progress isn't about eliminating procrastination completely. It's about shortening the gap between intention and action. It's about recognizing the emotional story behind the delay. You are not broken because you procrastinate. You are human. Your brain is trying to keep you safe, even if its strategy is outdated. Imagine approaching your next task differently. Instead of demanding perfection, you allow imperfection. Instead of waiting for motivation, you begin gently. Instead of attacking yourself for yesterday's delay, you focus on this moment. The psychology of procrastination teaches us something profound. We don't delay because we're incapable. We delay because we're afraid of failing, afraid of succeeding, afraid of not being enough. But growth begins when you act alongside fear, not after it disappears. The next time you catch yourself avoiding something important, take a breath. Acknowledge the discomfort. Remind yourself that starting imperfectly is still starting. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel confident. You just need to take one small step. And with each step, you rebuild something deeper than productivity. You rebuild trust in yourself. Change doesn't require becoming a different person. It requires understanding the emotional roots of your patterns and meeting them with patience. When you replace self-judgment with self-awareness, procrastination loses its grip. You don't do this to yourself because you're weak. You do it because somewhere along the way, avoiding felt safer than risking disappointment. Now you have the chance to choose differently, not through force, but through compassion. And that is where real progress begins.